how can they upgrade and make this team better, continue on this impressive path that they set forth in this year's postseason?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different guys for us to talk about, and we'll kind of gradually work through them. I know we talked about a bunch of random guys, especially on the starting pitching front in our show yesterday. But today, I want to talk about someone who I don't think we've mentioned at all to this point on the show, and that would be Jorge Soler.
Give him to me. Give him to me, Jesse.
A guy who I remember when we were doing our research at the trade deadline, trying to figure out who would make the most sense for the Diamondbacks to pursue. They kind of needed like a right-handed power bat, sort of, right? I mean, I guess that's sort of what Tommy Pham wound up being for the Diamondbacks. He didn't quite have the numbers that Jorge Soler did at the time, but it basically, I mean, at the time we didn't talk about him because Jorge Soler played for the Marlins. And
Correct.
The Marlins, much to the surprise of a lot of people, were very much in the thick of the race at that point and did not seem to be selling at the trade deadline. Hence, Jorge Soler was not available. But now he is available. He turned down, he had a player option that he declined for, I think it might have been the next 2 seasons, not just 2024. And now he hits the open market and is a free agent. And the Diamondbacks, we talked about it yesterday, could afford to, add some thump into the middle of their lineup if they're able to do so. And Jorge Soler could be that guy.
Give me that, as Connor Mormon says, that Soler power. We know that's energy efficient for sure. And man, what the Diamondbacks what they could use that power bat that, when Christian Walker, for instance, disappears like he did in the postseason, just having a second power back. 'Cause it really felt like, like you said, we did get some power from a couple of guys. Corbin flexed his power this season. Lourdes did. But for the most part, we had a bunch of guys at times, including Cattell, who were able to get on base, but just never having that big offensive threat. And not only that, but just like, again, that guy that teams, have to pitch around because every single time he's at the dish, there's a chance of him going yard, right? I mean, it just brings a completely different dynamic to this lineup right now that they don't really have. I mean, again, I don't mean to take anything away from Seawalk because he absolutely was that guy at times, but especially when he kind of slumps like he does, teams aren't exactly pitching around him.
In the postseason, I think I heard this on Jason Stark's show yesterday. Teams that out-homered their opponents went 25-4 in the playoffs. Homers just really matter, especially at that point in the season and during the regular season too. If the D-backs, like we said yesterday, if the D-backs don't bring back the 24 home runs they're losing from Lourdes Gurrriel Jr., you have to find a way to replace that in some way. And I think Jorge Soler could make a lot of sense. If we look at some of his numbers from last season, he hit 250, 341, 512. An 853 OPS altogether, 36 home runs, 75 RBI.
Bring that here.
There's a lot of value there for a guy who defensively, I don't know if you want Jorge Soler playing in the outfield. Similar situation to what we talked about yesterday with Justin Turner and third base. Soler did play a little bit of right field. I think it was 32 games last year for the Marlins, -5 defensive runs saved, -3 outs above average. Not good numbers there. No. You probably don't want him to play in the outfield unless you absolutely have to.
His WAR would probably be much higher here if it wasn't for his defense.
Absolutely. And that's why I don't think that Jorge Soler, for as good as 36 homers and an 853 OPS sound, I don't think Jorge Soler is like a total bank-breaking sort of a guy.
Yeah.
I just saw MLB Trade Rumors just came out with their predictions for free agent contracts. They have Soler at 3 years, $45 million, which I think might be a touch high. I could maybe see Soler signing for a little bit less than that, given some of the defensive limitations and some of the inconsistencies throughout his career. If the D-backs are able to do that, it could make a lot of sense for them. I think he had a 126 WRC plus this past season. There are only 2 free agents this offseason who were qualifying players who had a higher WRC plus in the regular season in 2023. Those 2 guys are Cody Bellinger and Shohei Ohtani. After those 2 guys, Jorge Soler had the next best the next best season. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't want to do it with Justin Turner probably. It would have to be an either or because, again, you don't really want these guys playing defense.
And I'm not going to be an old guy attacking old guys. But, I mean, if you are going to throw as much money as Justin Turner, sounds like he's going to demand on the market. I mean, I would much rather pursue a 31-year-old, that has the accolades that Soler has, right? Like, this goes beyond his numbers. The man is a 2-time champion with 2 different franchises, right? That experience is fairly valuable to a young team right now that's trying to get back there. His power numbers are incredible, but he was also a World Series MVP for one of those World Series. So like, his value fluctuates there depending on based on a lot of that stuff. But again, I think if you are going to open up the checkbook and pay not an insubstantial amount of money for someone, that might be the guy. This would be his 5th team if he did whatever team he joins here. So I mean, he's kind of a journeyman. He might not be looking for a long-term big deal at this point. So that might also fit the Diamondbacks' current plan of trying to like maybe not get someone for over 5 years, but someone for like 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think it would be, 345 is probably a pretty reasonable starting point. I mentioned I think it could be a little bit less, probably not a lot less. There's a reason that he opted out of what he had left with the Marlins and is hitting the open market and sort of betting on himself.
He does want that big contract probably, right?
But
I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at like his 2022 season with the Marlins, he played 72 games. He had a couple of different pretty significant injuries that were hindering him, and he had a 695 OPS. So he's the kind of guy who's still relatively young, especially compared to a Justin Turner.
Yeah.
But the fact that his track record is not particular, there's not a whole lot of consistency there, that in some ways could work in the Diamondbacks' favor and making Jorge Soler a much more affordable player than he otherwise would be. So yeah, I think it could make a lot of sense for the Diamondbacks. Again, it's not Turner and Soler and JD Martinez. Like, you can only have one DH at a time. Well, but these are all guys that would make some sense for them.